Welcome back, y'all. This is a highly requested video. We're going to be looking at GBT and more specifically custom GBTs for the API key. That rhymed on accident. Now, I'm going to be very clear here. This was actually kind of frustrating to get working. OpenAI and the way we do API keys when it comes to GBTs is a little bit more complex than it should be. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of things that if you feel like you're running into an area you shouldn't be, you probably shouldn't be. But I'm going to go and explain everything that I learned through the process of actually getting this to work, what you should know, and like the different things that happen during the process. So just to confirm it works, here is going to be our example today. So we're going to go ahead and connect a API called GNews API here. You can go ahead and start it there. You can just type in GNews API if you want to test this yourself. You can go to the website yourself. Coming over here, this is a working model here. So when I ask something like find the latest news of climate change here, we should get prompted by the API here. And then I should go ahead and say allow and then receive the relevant articles. All right, so we're loading here. Let's go ahead and allow here. Let's hope it works. And there you go. So it works. There's a lot going on here, y'all. So stay tuned here. This might be a really long video, but I'm going to essentially do this. I'm going to come over to our GPT customizer. So if you want to see that video, we did a full in-depth 30-minute plus video. You can go to check it out up there, how we build this. But this basically allows you to use a GPT to build GPTs, okay? Really cool stuff. So we're going to use this and we're going to do this entire process together. And as you see here, it works. But here's the big thing here. We're going to do this entire process together, but I'm going to show you this through the lens of I'm not just going to give you the baked cake here. I'm going to prepare the cake with you. E.g., you're going to see the errors with me. I'm going to show you how to troubleshoot them. I'm going to show you through the thought process, everything involved here, because this was a lot more complex than it should have been. And I learned a lot, but it was a little frustrating. But let's go and jump in. Last thing here, if you don't know who I am, my name is Corbin. I'm a full stack AI engineer. I've been making a ton of content in the last 8 months, over 1,000 videos when it comes to artificial intelligence automation for your personal and your business life. But without further ado, let's go and jump in here. No more introduction. We want to get going here. So first thing we need to understand is we're using our GPT customizer here. You can go ahead and find that in the description down below, just GPT Creator. Click the link, completely free. I went ahead and fine-tuned this myself so we can help build me out GPTs. Also, I'm going to have to update it after this video so it actually helps us better when it comes to documentation, as you'll see here. But I'm going to go ahead and say this. I am going to create a GBT using this documentation. So the idea behind this GBT is that it's going to be able to find us files for a knowledge base, but also help us with the coding part, such as creating JSON actions. That's kind of what they call them here. And what's great here is that we fine-tuned it to a point where it knows how to structure it, but we need to do one last thing here where essentially I need to kind of go back and reproctor it a little bit more so it gives you even better results. But for now, let's go ahead and see what it comes up with here. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, what are all the endpoints? So I could say what are all the capabilities, but I'm going to speak more in the documentation terms. Endpoints in this context just means what can we do with the software. As you see, we come over here and I go to documentation. Did I provide the documentation link? I did not even provide the documentation link. Actually, y'all, let me show you how to do this correctly. So the correct way to do it was I was supposed to provide the documentation link. So let me do this, and then this should give us a more refined answer. And I am locked out to 234. So I guess we're going to fast forward to there. All right, I'm back. I literally just sat here for 2 hours and just stared at it. No, I'm just joking. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to regenerate this, and this should work now. And there should be no more hiccups throughout this video. So for reference, when you want to use this GPT Creator here, do provide a link that is the documentation link. As you'll see, this will be a better and more effective answer than we got previously, as it should be showing me the endpoints here and the associated functions that they do. While that loads, if we come over to the documentation here, we see that we have a couple of endpoints here. We have the search endpoint and the top line or top headlines endpoint. This will give you descriptions here. We're going to learn a little bit more about structuring and stuff like this in this video, but first, let's come back over here and just see the output so far. Okay, so there you go. So we got an example of an endpoint here. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with this endpoint. We're going to use the search endpoint here. We're going to say, okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and use the search endpoint. Please give me the custom, or let's just be more specific here, OpenAI schema. So that's kind of what it's called for custom actions here, and we should get some code here. Okay, so as you see here, we're getting the code here. We got the relevant URL. This is a great starting point, right? You don't want to sit down and code out all of this, because you mess up with one bracket, there's going to be an issue. One thing I want to note as well, if your outputs include something like this, where it's like a slash slash, and then it explains like what's going on there, that's going to cause errors in your action. So you want to delete anything that's a slash slash. That's in code. That's called a comment. That's just basically outside of OpenAI schema. You can add comments to code that's kind of be like, hey, by the way, this does this. In this context, we can't do that. So keep that and note that. For now, though, as you see here, we're getting our entire output, as we wouldn't want to code this ourselves. And we're going to go ahead and copy this and bring this over to our custom GPT we're creating today. All right, so we're going to go ahead and create a new GPT here. We're going to go to configure. I'm going to go ahead and turn off web browsing and dialog image creation. I did say in an earlier video that you would need web browsing in order for APIs to work. I found out that's not actually true. I think I just hit a really weird coincidence where there was an error, and then I clicked it. There's actually a study where a pigeon was receiving food every 10 minutes, but when it flapped its wings, it correlated the food that it was given to the wing flapping, even though it had no correlation. I know that was really random. Okay, jumping back over here though. So we're gonna go ahead and add our action. Before we do that though, if you want to go ahead and follow along on your end, you can come over to G News, completely free. Get started now. Once you have made an account, you'll be provided to a dashboard like this. And as you see here, we got our API key. No point in trying to take it. I'm gonna refresh it. I'm gonna change it. But you can have your API key here. So API key is our way of opening that door to access the data found on this platform. What's great about this platform too is that they give you up to 100 free sends a day. Use this in the context of training yourself so you know how to approach other APIs. Let's come back over to here though. So I'm gonna go and copy this again, make sure we have that. And let's go ahead and create our action here. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste. And then you'll see that we got search, news, articles, and we have the method of get. If you're familiar, get is, I'm going to go and jump right here. Get is our way of taking in data. Post would be sending data. So we're going to get data here. It's going to choose the path of search, and then we're going to add some additional information here. So the first thing we need to add here is going to be authentication. This is a little tricky. So I'm going to let me go ahead and just move some of my tabs real quick, y'all. And then we're going to kind of walk through this one by one. Okay, first thing here is I'm going to go ahead and copy this to my clipboard, and I'm going to paste it in here. Okay. Let me explain a couple things here, because this is kind of tricky. So when I hit save here and then I open it back up, you might be like, okay, did I even paste it? Like, does it exist? It does exist. First thing to note, it does save it and it does exist. It's not like it's just blank and it never saved. First thing. Second thing is this. Then we have different auth types. Bearer, it'll be very clear in the documentation that you will be using a bear token for the context of an API key. But what I'll be very, very transparent here, you'll rarely use bear in the context of an API key. You'll more likely use that in the context of OAuth, which we're going to do a video on. I know this is a really highly requested one. Don't worry, we'll get to it. Knowing this, you're most likely either going to choose between basic or custom. In this context, let's go ahead and look at the documentation real quick. Coming over to authentication, as you see up there, you notice how it says it's going to be part of the query string. There is no reference to as you see here, there is no reference to a custom header name. Therefore, we're going to opt in to choose basic. I'll paste it one more time just for good measure. Alternatively, here is documentation that showcases it used in the context of a custom. Coming over to news API, as you see up here, this is kind of more obvious than you would think. You go to authentication, as you say, via the HTTP header X API key. So in the context of I was using this documentation here, and I just realized I showed my API key here, so I'm probably going to have to delete this as well. In the context of this, you would put in your API key here, and then you name it there, right? So you put your API key there. But in this context, we are just going to need to do a simple, basic API key here, what is really weird here, though, is typically in webhook and passing data, when I see the term basic, I think of like a username and password login. I don't know why there's a conflict of terminology there, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is that we're going to do basic here. Knowing this is going to give me an error. Almost 100% certain it's going to give me an error. So don't worry, we're going to work it through. But I'm going to go ahead and copy the available action here. So here's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, we are creating this GPT to provide us the top 5 most recent articles using this action. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and do semicolon here. I'm gonna paste search news articles here, and then let's just start with that. Let's go ahead and let it update its name, its profile image, and stuff like this. So let's go start like that. Also reference that in the code itself, it was called operation ID. As you see here, if I hit this, it was called operation ID. Where is it at? Okay, right here. That is how we're gonna reference it when we talk to GPT as like a chatbot thing, like what I just did. As you see here, I can also like change the name of it. So if you ever want to change the name of an action to be like more clear, you can just come over here. See, it added the spaces right there. For now, though, I'm going to go back here. One other thing I want to point out here, because I'm going to try to cover everything right now, y'all, because this is frustrating. Sometimes when you do updates to this, it won't save. So keep that in mind. If you find yourself running into multiple, so part of this is like, if you're watching this weeks from now, they might have solved this or might have saved this glitch. But some of this stuff, if you're making an update to the schema, check and make sure that it actually got pushed. And the best way to do that would be like me backing all the way out and then coming back in here and checking. Keep that in mind. Okay. Coming over back over to create, we're going to go, okay, good. We're going to say just present them as is. Please give me a name and profile image. Let's just get that out of the way so we can kind of just start setting this up. I'm gonna go ahead and save it once we get this profile and image. All right, so we got this. I went ahead and came back into it here. I'm going to confirm this again, and there we go. Okay, so I'm not gonna go ahead and dive into the intricacies of adding knowledge base files and making it private or public. You can check out the video in our playlist up here. We go over that. This is just for API key and everyone running into issues with API key. So first thing we're gonna do here is this. We're gonna do this. You're gonna grab your available action name again, and we're gonna say, okay, let's test run this. Please try the action of, and then I'm gonna just provide it like this, and we should get an error here. If this works, then I'm just like pretty crazy. So right off the bat, we're gonna say allow, and if it does, okay, here we go. Okay, perfect. So I know the solution to this, and I'm gonna tell you the solution to this, but you may face a different error than that error right there. Well, let me go ahead and give you some troubleshoots here. Here's the first thing that you need to understand of what happens when GPT communicates with APIs is it messes up the HTTP request URL. What do I mean? I mean this. So the way we receive the data in this context is we send it as an HTTP request. So the way this works, so for example, we're doing a search for ours, right? The way this works is that the main URL here, so let me go ahead and show y'all this on this end over here. So go like this. As you see, this is our main URL, right? And then on top of that, that's where this slash comes into because this is the certain thing we're requesting from that API. So in this context, it's search. Therefore, what happens here is then it will add additional parameters to that underlying search. So as you see here from this documentation, let me go ahead and zoom in. This might be a little bit hard to read, y'all. Okay. All right. And then you get it. Here we go. This is a little bit better. So, as you see here, it says Q equals example. So what does Q mean in this context? This is like basically what's the keyword we're searching here? And you can even read into that, right? And as you hear the keywords. And then on top of that, it says and API key, right? And then obviously the API key that I'm using currently. This is the correct way to structure the URL for requesting the data on this API documentation. Knowing this, sometimes ChatGPT can get a little too creative for us, and it doesn't give us the type of URL we like. So here is some solutions in order to debug your issues when you're dealing with other API documentation. We're going to say, okay, when there is an error with search news articles, you put your action, please provide the following information. Semicolon, HTTP request URL, JSON sent payload. So this is the data we're sending, and then JSON and JSON error. I don't know why I'm capitalizing in there. Error payload message. I'm gonna hit enter here, and then it should update. Sometimes this thing won't like to. If you don't see that little UI thing doing the little wrench thing, that means that we have an issue here. Okay, good. If it doesn't do that for you though, make sure you just say something like, hey, please push this forward on the front end. Please update, use some terminology like that. so it actually listens to you. Let's go ahead and do this first. Okay, perfect. One other thing I want to point out, and you might have already noticed it by now, is notice how I'm testing it here rather than testing it here. I found better reliability in this context when I tested over here comparative to over here. What happens over here is that there seems to be a security oversight here where certain things say like, oh, we don't have the JSON, or we don't have the error message, or we don't have, there's something going on here. Don't test here, test here, trust. Okay, so as you see here, it should update to how I want the error message to output here. I might need to reprocess a little bit more here. We're gonna go ahead and say, okay, please test again for this specific action. I'm gonna hit enter, hit allow here. Okay, perfect. Yep, we know it's in, yeah, okay, there we go. Here we go, okay, perfect. So, I can already tell right off the bat that the error is an API key error. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I know what I need to do next here. But for your use case, it might not be as obvious. It's saying HTTP URL, request URL is not available. That's not actually true. So I'm actually gonna have to reprocess this again because that's just not true. In order to do so, though, what I've noticed and what I've had to do in order to make this work is think about it. So what we're doing here is essentially we're telling it to do an API call, and it's filling the underlying variables with how the AI interprets what the variables should look like. E.g., it's saying to itself, okay, what are we going to put for the example? What are we going to put for this? So an issue that you run into is sometimes its assumptions are just entirely wrong. So in order to solve for that, we're going to go ahead and use this example here. So we're going to go ahead and bring this back over here, and we're going to go ahead and say, okay, please structure. Actually, before I do that, I need to make sure, let's see what is using here. So we are using, so this is the different parameters. So we're using the, let me go ahead and zoom in, y'all, so you can see this. This is probably better. Okay, so we're using query. This is how we do search of keywords. We're using lang. This is our language. We're using country. So this is just for your reference. So we go paths, and then you can kind of get like everything associated with it. So we're doing query. I don't know if that's how you say it. It's probably not how you say it. Lang, country, max, and then you can kind of get an idea, obviously, of what's occurring there, and then API key. So that's everything to create a successful URL for request. From here, though, let's go ahead, because we're using all that, we actually got to provide the correct HTTP GET URL that is supposed to be associated with that. So what I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to go ahead and go all the way down here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and say, okay, zoom out a little bit. Okay, based on what we are requesting, please provide what the HTTP URL request URL would look like. Sometimes you gotta be a little tricky with ChatGPT. And then I'm providing, this is what's in the schema, therefore this is what should be expected to be found. There you go. So we're getting exactly what it should quote unquote look like. As you see here, good, 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 and good. Okay, perfect. So this is all correct. This is using the correct correct structuring. So how do I double check that? I come back over to our API documentation here, and I can kind of just look at it and be like, okay, so is it doing this correct? Q. Okay, come back over here. Okay, search Q. Perfect. One thing I want to point out, what I ran into, which is huge, is that one of the issues I was running into, I was like, why is this not working? It's because the way they were structuring the HTTP URL was they were doing, instead of Q, they were putting the entire word of query into the URL. So rather than Q, it would be like this. It was doing this, and then it was actually doing this. So I'm like, obviously, that's not the correct way to do it in the URL according to the documentation. So keep in mind that ChatGPT kind of could go crazy on you and throw off stuff that shouldn't be thrown off. So you can kind of gut check it too if you come over here. This is how it's named in the URL with name. So obviously Q is correct. And the reason I knew that, just to hammer it home, is because they said the parameter name's Q, therefore we use Q. Okay, coming back over here, coming back over to create. Let's go ahead and try this again. We're gonna say, okay, perfect. Please update our GPT to follow this structuring. Semicolon, and I'm gonna provide the exact structuring. Obviously, I'm gonna double check the documentation to make sure it looks all correct, and then we're gonna go ahead and get that updating GPT. All right, so supposedly it's gone ahead and grabbed that. What you'll notice is it'll add it to the instructions in order to make sure it's consistent in the way it requests it. We're gonna get another error again. That's kind of the point of this video, though. I want to keep. Don't worry, there's a solution at the end. Like I'm gonna show you the solution, but this is how you troubleshoot. Okay, so we're gonna say, okay, please test again, and also show me the API key you are using. So here's the thing. This might sometimes GPT will show it, sometimes it won't. But one thing I want to point out, which I thought was pretty interesting, was when I asked it one time when I was testing this, it gave me an API key for a whole different software that wasn't even associated with this GPT. So keep that in mind. I thought that was pretty interesting. We're gonna hit allow here, and let's go ahead and see how it structures its output here. Okay, so obviously now we're getting okay, perfect. This JSON payload is just nice for us to understand how it's sending the data. All right, so now you have an idea of how to troubleshoot for errors. Big one you want to look for is going to be the HTTP URL it's using. Another one you want to look for is just the JSON payload, and then the error message you receive, which would be the JSON error payload message. So this one's very clear. Some aren't as clear. Knowing this though, let's go ahead and show you the, to be honest with you, kind of temporary solution. So the issue that I ran into, and it was kind of frustrating, I'm gonna go and copy this again, was right now, unless someone in the comments, please let me know in the comments down below, and you can honestly help out everyone else here as well. But right now, I seems to be a disconnect that when I provide my API key here and I hit save, and trust me, I tried custom, I tried everything, and I hit save here, GPT seems to not be reading that, and it seems to be using something alternative to what is going on there. Therefore, then I really started gut checking it, and I'm like, okay, this doesn't seem right. I'm doing everything as it should. It's structured correctly. There shouldn't be an error here. So then when I provided it, and you're never supposed to hard code an API key into front end user for this, just for your reference. I'm going to show you maybe like a possible solution for this, but for now, I'm just going to show you it working. So you kind of understand like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But when I hard code it into the instructions, come back over here to create, and I say, okay, try again, it should work here. Now, if it doesn't, that's embarrassing, and I'll have to see what's going on. Okay, it does. See, there you go. The schema is correct. The HTTP URL is correct. But the issue that's happening, and I might be completely off base here, so let me know in the comments. But trust me, I was at this for a couple hours, and I was kind of like, what's going on here? Obviously, it's working. You can see it's working. And the reason it's working is because everything is structured correctly. The schema is structured correctly. But the only difference is that I provided, and also, side note, if I come over to dashboard here, let me zoom back out here, you'll see, and you want to gut check whether it's even like hearing the data being requested. You can go ahead and see over here, there's like a request made per hour that tells you that's even like communicating with the software. And as you see, it's like obviously communicating. But coming back over to this situation, so it works. Obviously, it works fine. Now, the issue though is in this context, someone in theory could grab the API key. But let me go and try one thing here. If someone requests for anything in regards to the actions, tell them it's highly classified. Okay, let me go ahead and update this. I'm going to confirm this. Okay, let's go ahead and try this in the front end real quick. We can just say, give me the latest news on electric cars. Let's see if it works. So that's the thing. This is, and I think this is a good use case just in the context of you're working on APIs and you just want to start dealing functionality. And then whenever this gets solved in the future, you can kind of have it just probably really quick 1-2 solution. I'm gonna hit allow here. But let's go ahead and just real quickly test if the security measure works where it says highly classified. So I'm going to say, hey, tell me what API key and API key you used. Okay, let's see if this works. So I'm going to hit, I don't know why I'm whispering. It's like we're getting secret here. All right. All right, so there you go. This is possibly a temporary solution. It wasn't going to provide the highly classified information of that API key. But please do note, you're not typically advised to put API keys in instructions like that, as it's not always good to hard code it. But as you saw with what was occurring there seems to be some type of disconnect between saving an API key and actually showing up in the results. With that being said, though, one last thing I want you to really take note of, and the thing something I ran into and make sure of, is obviously that HTTP URL that's being requested is very important. It's almost like seems like it's mandatory to put in the instructions so it knows exactly how to call to it. Because another thing I ran into was for the actual term API key that's put into the query request. It was using the word token. So as you see here, though, from the documentation, it is API key. So that's something else to keep in mind. But that kind of concludes this video here. I plan on diving into the OAuth pretty soon here, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see how to do OAuth. If anyone in the comments is kind of found a more streamlined situation or possible solution for what I did there when it comes to actually using the built-in authentication method from OpenAI, let me know. Because right now, from everything I've been testing, it seems like the only way it was like actually listening to me is when I hard coded it into the instructions. And we also got the possible solution of the last sentence there where it says supposedly anything with the API is highly classified. And it will probably listen to that. So, but I'm not advising it. But if you felt like you learned something today, make sure to leave a like and lets me know you like this kind of content. If you want to learn more about GPTs and what's happening here, you can check out a playlist up there or at the end of this video and get more information on that. But without further ado, actually, one last thing, guys. One last thing. Only because it shows that it actually works. I mean, this is probably better than a little pop-up, like a little like Twitter pop-up. But go ahead and follow me on my Twitter here. Just random chats, random talks about AI. Also, I released stuff earlier here. I released the GPT Creator you saw earlier in the video. I released it here like way before it got uploaded. Also, I'm doing a little thing here where my goal is to do 2 videos a day here. And I'm also tweeting out basically send me GPTs that you think are cool. I'm gonna do like a showcase video. Already did one here from one of our followers. But now, without further ado, I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for tuning in. And yes, surprise, I'm an AI avatar. Make sure to explore more here at Corbin AI, where we demystify AI for your personal and business life. Until next time.